stands for the Asia Pacific Forum on Economic Cooperation. It's a summit where 27 world leaders, I think it is, get together from the Asia Pacific region, but they also include the United States in that grouping. And they have a meeting to talk about regional economic issues.
The 20-something countries that are represented inside APEC are really trying to stitch up deals that will benefit the ruling classes or the corporations inside their own countries.
These people, in order to maintain their economic order, are relying on depressing workers' conditions and depressing pay rates.
We're going to spend $300 million on hosting APEC. If you want to talk about disruption, let's look at the 2.8 metre wall that's splitting Sydney in half.
That's just an example of how close to fascism Australia is becoming.
If you want to talk about a waste of resources, let's look at the $600,000 water cannon. Let's look at the deployment of 5,000 police.
The mainstream media are saying that the protests are going to be violent.
I'm from Epping Boys High School, and they've threatened all of the students that do protest with a suspension.
Young people can see through the mainstream media lies. The mainstream media lies to them almost every day. If Alan Jones is against the protest, then maybe I should be for it.
I'm protesting because of the war in Iraq.
Every rational, compassionate person has a reason to hate George Bush and what he represents.
We've got to do something. Many people have died in Iraq. We just got to do this.
What the mainstream media has been doing is really demonising people that are coming out to protest.
Much of the mainstream media is run by large corporate interests, and they have a particular interest in maintaining the current world economic order.
If we don't challenge these laws, if we don't make our voices heard during APEC, we're actually going to see further limitations on the rights to protest in the future.
We're just off to our high school, Tempe High. We've never been there before. We're going to leaflet and just tell people about the walkout, which is tomorrow, and we're just going to give them stacks of information. Do you know about the high school walkout? Protest George Bush tomorrow, protest the war in Iraq tomorrow, walk out of class.
We're protesting around the slogan of no more blood for oil.
Protest the war in Iraq, walk out against George Bush. You guys know about the high school walkout?
The police have been trying to intimidate students against coming to the protests.
High school walkout. George Bush gets to Australia today. 1 o'clock.
I think that was a really good high school to do. We haven't really got out to the Tempe area before. There's a group of young women that said that they were going to start organising on their high school, so an indication that George Bush is so unwelcome here.
We want to create a world or an Australia where there's no uranium mining, that we have an energy grid that's based on solar or sustainable energy.
A people-centred worldview is the one that I'm after. It's one that respects the rights of people to organise collectively. It's one that promotes peace and disarmament as an answer to global conflict and negotiation, as opposed to increased militarism. It's one that talks about sustainable environmental policies, and it's one that talks about participatory democracy.
I support. Actually, I'm speaking in favour of town hall or
in favour of having demonstration at town hall.
George Bush is an oil baron. He went to war in Iraq for oil.
We cannot sit on the sidelines while a warmonger like George Bush comes to this country.
When the world's biggest terrorist comes to Australia, I think that we've got a responsibility to protest his actions.
We stand with millions of people around the world that are pushing for positive social change, that puts people first and that talks about social justice.
In 2003, I invaded the sovereign nation of Iraq with the United States Marine Corps 1st Tank Battalion.
Under the US occupation of Iraq, which started in 2003, over 1 million Iraqi people have died.
Right now, I'm involved with a group called Iraq Veterans Against the War. We're thousands of veterans all across the United States and across the world. We're refusing to fight. We're putting down our weapons.
We cannot sit on the sidelines in the face of innocent people being killed every day in Iraq. We cannot stand idly by while the fate of humanity, in the case of global warming, hangs in the balance.
Climate change policy of George Bush and John Howard are determined by the fossil fuel companies.
And it's in the interest of the oil corporations. The same reason they're in Iraq is the same reason they won't have serious action on climate change, for the oil corporations and the fossil fuel corporations, for that profit.
scared about people power. That's why they put in the APEC police powers legislation. That's why they've erected a fence throughout Sydney. That's why they've bought a water cannon. That's why they've been practising their tasers. That's why they've emptied the prisons. And that's why they've taken us to court today.
We're not the ones that have gone out and bought the water cannon. We're not the ones that are talking about perhaps we should have tasers and stun guns. We're not the ones who've talked about using capsicum spray or setting up large roadblocks and inconveniencing large numbers of people. That's really been what the police have been doing.
It is morally and practically indefensible to compile lists of people who can be excluded from the APEC areas.
My name's Stan Jones and I'm an excluded person.
The only answer to intimidation is to stand up to that intimidation.
The reason we are on this list is not because we are a violent threat. It is because we are a political threat.
It's something that we need to challenge.
These are unprecedented powers that have been given to the New South Wales Police, the Federal Police and our security organisations.
The right to protest is a fundamental right in democracy and one which we must all fight to preserve.
There is nothing that even remotely comes close to the intimidation campaign that is being waged by the state government and the federal government and the New South Wales Police against these protests.
It's one thing for our security forces to be concerned about public order and safety when it comes to a large terrorist incident, but it's another thing to talk about protests and demonstrators in that same category. That's a really dangerous precedent that they're setting, that somehow protesters can be lumped in with any other kind of security concerns we might have about potential terrorist attacks.
Not the police, not the state, people will decide our fate. We condemn the activities of the Prime Minister, the Premier and the Commissioner of Police who have done nothing other than talk up violence.
All the way along they've been talking about violence, all the way along they've been trying to intimidate and scare people away from coming to the demonstration. We have the right to protest and we will be vigorously pursuing support of our democratic rights and support of this protest in the court tomorrow.
The New South Wales Police will be taking us to the Supreme Court at 7 a.m, so we'll be outside to show them that we will continue to assert our democratic right to protest.
Not the police, not the state, people will decide our fate, not the police.
Tomorrow will be George Bush's first full day in Sydney, and the students of Sydney will be coming out just like we've come out this afternoon to make very clear that he's not welcome here. Bush is not welcome here. We want the troops out of Iraq and we want real solutions to climate change.
Go home, George Bush! Go home, George Bush!
We won't be intimidated. We're going to go ahead with the demonstration. We're calling on people to come and join us. Obviously, the more people that turn up, the safer it's going to be and the more loudly we'll get our message across.
After I finished high school, I moved to Darwin, which had a really polarising effect on me. There's so much racism in that town, in that city, and I found that very confronting.
Summary offences are these really minor offences using a megaphone, for instance.
It's really hard to pinpoint the moment that I decided I would become politically active. I think we are the sum of our experiences.
While I was in Darwin, I was driving my car along a really busy road, and there was a woman lying in the middle of the road at like peak hour, 4 o'clock, so there were school buses going past. She was taking up a whole lane of traffic and she was bleeding from her head. She was outside a police and St John's ambulance station, and there were people watching her lying in the middle of the road from their houses and from their front yards, but no one had stopped to help her. They didn't stop because she was an Aboriginal woman.
And this is always an evolving process. I mean, I don't pretend that I have all the answers, but I also think that it's only a process that we can work through together to resolve.
It wasn't just individual police that were rotten or racist, but it was actually the laws. So one of the first campaigns that I was involved in was the mandatory sentencing campaign. And I thought everything would be okay once the Labor government came in. But when that happened, they just changed the name of the law. They just made a law that actually made it easier to lock up Aboriginal people.